issue that I wanted to, check your opinion on was, what do you do when the organization itself is scaling? So for example, you have the initial set of rules it's written, you have the initial set of policies there, but now your organization is scaling in the sense the number of APIs are growing very, very fast. And even from an infra standpoint, your cloud environments, for example, are growing, or for example, you're going multi-cloud. So these are things which are not very straightforward.
Yes.
What are the specific things that you would prioritize or take care of in such a scenario?
Right. Yeah, the answer again in this case gets a little complicated simply because we are going into enterprise culture territory here. So as soon as you go into enterprise culture territory, things start to break down. It's never a technical problem. It's always a convincing X or Y or Z problem. So that becomes the issue. So, but there are a few things that I think every company should do who is trying to embark on not just this journey, but any journey into better security, right? The first thing I would say is, first of all, set the right expectations. So setting the right expectations, I mean creating awareness with the teams that are concerned about this solution even existing, right? Most of the time people, it's not that usually within companies, I've seen terrible messaging simply because people just don't explain what this is. They just say that, yeah, we are implementing this, and most people feel left out of that decision. They don't understand what on earth that is. What is OPA? What does REGO mean? What does policy as code mean? Most people don't get it. It's not intuitive to everybody that, oh yeah, this is awesome. This is going to reduce my job. So marketing is always important for anything. And within a company, within a team, within any kind of small, medium, large, it's important to market things and market
Especially
it
for security.
Exactly. So it's very silly to expect that, while I'm going to make this top-down decision, everybody better follow it. That kind of approach doesn't work. So I would say awareness training on this stuff makes a big difference. The other thing that I think makes a big difference is threat modeling, weirdly speaking, which has nothing to do with this. Most people, so if you have something like this, if you've started down this journey and you do a decent job of threat modeling, a lot of the controls can be fixed with policy as code. The problem is, if you don't do a threat model, you would start to realize that everything is now offloaded to the application. So threat modeling, I would say, is one of those fundamental things that you should do to reduce the burden on your application and build in more impetus on policy as code. So for instance, if you threat model an application and realize that access control is your big issue, and somebody says that, this can be offloaded to this particular component that is meant to do access control, then you can start talking about the fact that, hey, yeah, this is there, we can do it, we can definitely implement it this way, and get that implementation rolling as soon as possible. So that is the benefit of threat model. The problem is, if you are in this predefined control mindset, then it will not fly. So I would say these two things are going to be very important. Of course, there are lots of other things, but I think these two really critical things are very important for this initiative and many other security initiatives to succeed.
Yeah, I think I totally see where you're coming from. I think having done it for some of the organizations where, in fact, at the level of threat modeling, you can draw a parallel in terms of various different APIs or applications showing similar threats, and you can have an org level, for example, product policy or security policy around just for products, or even network, because threat modeling is not limited to the code lines of code which are there, right? Or a specific issue, or for example, cores. I mean, no offense to all of these, because all of these are bringing in a very specific perspective, wherein threat modeling will bring in a lot of width in terms of your idea and visibility into what threats you have, and then having that centralized sort of a policy will then implement that across.
Exactly. So if you have done an effective threat model, and you're already on this journey. So you can start offloading things to this, which makes your life easier in the long run.
Yeah. And you can also quantify a lot of that in terms of fixes, because now you have policies for that, which already prevent many of these threats.
Exactly. That's a very valid.
But what about the, for example, if you're going multi-cloud, are there any specific things to keep in mind in terms of policy, or something that you should have formulated already in terms of policy as code when you're going multi-cloud?
So with multi-cloud, it tends to get a little diversified. Okay, so because each cloud provider comes with their own. So when you look at multi-cloud, it really depends on the how the cloud environments are laid out, right? So there is, in multi-cloud, the first thing you have to ideally do is first figure out the policy at the cloud control plane level itself. So for instance, what you should do, let's say you're using Amazon and Azure, right? Let's say you're using Amazon to host, to run containers, and Azure to run VMs and databases, whatever. I'm just giving you a off the top of my head example. It's not, it's just contrived. Now, the policies that you can automatically set up certain policies in Amazon using service control policies or something that says, hey, you know what? You cannot launch containers outside this region. You can't launch containers maybe with this kind of a configuration. You know, people who don't, accounts that don't have this kind of a set of access parameters cannot launch this particular container. You cannot run any other service other than the ECS or Fargate service in AWS. You can create those SCPs and load that into your account if you're using AWS organization. You can do the same thing in Azure. So that is kind of like the baseline pre-prep baseline policy that you can use to build additional things on top of it. So when you're going multi-cloud, it's very important to understand the policy engines within each cloud. Because unless you are using, of course, if you're using like commercial tools and stuff like that, they kind of do it for you. I would think at least some of the good ones would probably do it. But if they don't, there's a good chance that you will have to do it yourself. So it's very important to understand these policy frameworks for each of these clouds and then implement it accordingly. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge with multi-cloud. So that is where I would start. And from that point on, I would use a similar framework that I would use for everything else in the stack. But that bedrock part of it has to be very clearly laid out.
Excuse me. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that.